they very much said to me, oh no, Meghan's going to stay in America. Meghan's going to stay in America, and Harry's just going to come back.
Is this the beginning of some type of separation?
How he's managed to pull this off is because he's driven a wedge between his father and the heir. It's about Charles trying to take back control after that horribly botched announcement of his cancer. And he genuinely believes now that he has been spared by God and sees it as his mission to repair this hole at the heart of the royal family.
Sykes, who is, of course, the man behind The Brilliant Royalist on Substack and YouTube, and also now the author. Very excited about this, Tom. It's the first time since you have announced your book, Dukes of Hazzard, Harry, Andrew, and Edward, or the Dukes, depending on which country you're in. But all of a sudden, shit just got real, Tom. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, it's a huge development, isn't it? I mean, Harry and Meghan moving back to the United Kingdom, and it's funny, Dan, because actually, and you'll know this yourself. When you're writing a book, you're always having this struggle of what are you going to hold and what are you going to include. And I had a fairly lengthy chapter, which is now going to need to be rewritten, about how a friend of Harry's telling me that, he was going to go house hunting, that he was looking, and that person said to me that he was looking in the Cotswolds near Highgrove, where, of course, he grew up, where he knows everybody, where he knows the roads, where he knows the back roads, where he knows the pubs, where he knows the secret shortcuts and the footpaths and all those kinds of things, and still has a kind of network of people there. So I'm going to be very interested to see whether they do end up in the Cotswolds. And it's not going to be very long till we know. It'll only be about 10 days. And I would think that if they do go to the Cotswolds, then I think that the school will probably be Beaudesert, which, has some form in hosting royal kids. If they're at the other end of the Cotswolds, it might be more like the Dragon. But we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, what an extraordinary development. And I have to say, although I wasn't I was not entirely I'm not entirely utterly surprised it's happened, but I'm very surprised at the speed with which it has happened, that it's happened so quickly. And I'm also amazed by the palace's barefaced insistence that the king didn't know till Sunday. Yeah, sure. Pull the other one, mate. It's got bells on.
I mean, it's interesting, Tom. Let's just talk a little bit, because obviously now that you're outside the Royal Rota, one of the great things that you do through The Royalist, and we report on it a lot here on Outspoken, is sort of pull the curtain up and reveal the mechanics of how this all works. And there's a really great super chat that I've just gotten from Margm, who says, how do we know this is true? And of course, I completely understand, Tom, why people would ask that question. There has been so much false briefing. Meghan's going to come. We're going to see the children. They're going to be unveiled at Invictus. Oh, they're going to be staying at Buckingham Palace. Now they're not. But Tom, I think for me, when I noticed is when you could see this was a coordinated release. Like, it wasn't just the Daily Telegraph revealing this, and they had clearly been embargoed. That is a term in the industry, which means you cannot reveal the information which has been PR'd to you until a certain time. And surprise, dropping at the identical time, Tom, a so-called world exclusive also on the front page of my old newspaper, The Sun. So what that suggests to me is that Harry and Meghan's team had been briefing over the course of the day, and the newspapers, in exchange for that briefing and that confirmation, had agreed to hold publication of the story until 10 p.m. So that's why I think you can know that it's true, firstly. But what are you hearing about how this all developed?
Yeah, I think it is true, but I also have a lot of sympathy with people who are skeptical. There was a lot of nonsense, last time they came, and a lot of people, felt that the whole meeting with Charles wasn't credible, felt that the timeline didn't match up. And, I do genuinely have a lot of sympathy with those people, because we've just been lied to over and over again by Harry and Meghan's press office. I mean, we were most notably lied to last year about the meeting between Meredith Mains and Tobin Andre. The Sussex press office swore blind that they were nothing to do with it. Charlotte Griffiths subsequently disclosed that that meeting was briefed to her by the Sussex side. So, and that's just one small example. Now, of course, as your earlier guests were mentioning about the Kardashians, we had this other barefaced lie about the Kardashians. No, we were given a consent form and we ticked no. And, there was no consent form was the line that I was given by the Kardashians. And then the Sussexes had to kind of concede that it wasn't true, or getting married in our back garden 3 days before our wedding. Sorry, the Archbishop of Canterbury says that that would have been a serious crime were he to have done it. So I have a lot of sympathy with people who think that it's not true. And the bottom line is, let's just wait and see, right? Because we're going to know in 10 days. At this stage, you wouldn't put it past Meghan and Harry to suddenly say that actually there's been something awful has happened and that actually they can't come because everybody's behaved so dreadfully towards them.
Or they don't get the security, Tom. They don't get the security.
Well, I think that's the big question, isn't it, Dan? Because actually, if you look at the court papers that were, because this has been in court, right, multiple times about the security. So a lot of the documentation about why they don't have security is very far from being a state secret. It's all over this paperwork. And one of the main reasons that they don't have security is because they are not in the bracket of people who are protected. They are not in the cohort of people who are protected. And one of the factors that means they are not in that cohort is that they do not live in the United Kingdom. Now, if they live in the United Kingdom, they tick one of the boxes. And if Charles gives Harry a very minor role at a very minor charity, they are suddenly working royals again, and they will be entitled to security. And, who knows? But I mean, it's quite amusing, isn't it? That 6 years ago, they were saying they were in dreadful fear of their lives. And just last year, there could be acid attacks and knife attacks, and it's all the media's fault for whipping up hatred towards them. But now actually it's fine.
But Tom,
never mind about that.
Well, indeed. And I mean, that is ludicrous. And we knew that was just, well, in my view, it was always just a money play, right? They don't want to have the $3 million security bill. If they get the government funded security, I know this because if you speak to former prime ministers about it, which I have done, it doesn't matter if they're going on holiday in the Maldives or if they're going for a working trip in Israel, they get the security. The whole point is if you are considered someone who needs protection and security, it doesn't matter where you are. So Harry and Meghan would get it even if they were at their home in Montecito. And all of a sudden, $3 million a year on private security costs saved in a flash. But I think the bigger point, Tom, is the one that you just made before that on the royal duties, because it's already happening. The briefing is already happening. It's just being done subtly. This was in Matt Wilkinson's Sun piece, right? So there initially was the first line. It is understood Harry and Meghan will not receive any money from the public purse while back in the UK, and that he will not undertake any official royal duties. And you think, oh, well, okay, that's good, right? This is the next line, Tom. This is the next line. Sources say, clearly this is Harry and Meghan, sources, this is Liam Maguire, say if there are discussions on any future role for him, it would need to take place between him and his father. So the translation there is that they're already suggesting, they're already dropping the hints that Harry is going to be asking his father for a royal role. And you know exactly the game that he's going to play, Tom. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is out of action. Oh, George, we've got to give George his privacy. 5 years at Eton, he can't be doing anything. Charlotte and Louis are too young. You need me. Papa, you need me. You need me.
As you know, Dan, one of the risks of being a journalist is that when you're reporting things that aren't popular or that people think are just frankly just couldn't possibly be true, but that are from good sources who you've decided to trust or you've learned to trust over the years, that people can say that you're talking nonsense. And all you can do is sit back and wait until it happens. And I remember you had to you're a very good example of that, right? With the Mexit story. I remember, people saying it is all complete rubbish. Then, of course, they had to confirm it. I've been reporting for quite some time that Charles is very, very keen to welcome Harry back to the United Kingdom. I've been very clear that I personally think this is a mistake, but that's frankly neither here nor there, is it? That's just my opinion. Who am I? Why do they bother about? Why should they bother about me? The point is that, you know, please, boys, don't make my final years a misery, right? That translation is, I want you to shake hands, to knock your heads together, and to get on and get over this. And I'm the king, and I'm laying down the rules, and those are what the rules are. Um, it leaves William in a really, really invidious and difficult position, because what is William going to do now, right? Is he going to say, I'm not coming to Sandringham if Harry's going, and look like a 5-year-old? Or is he going to say, I'm going to be the bigger person and I'm going to smile broadly at my brother and, never complain and never explain and be the embodiment of that? So it's a really, really difficult situation, but it doesn't come as a huge, I mean, I'm very surprised at the speed of it, but I'm not surprised that it's happening because I've been saying for so long that something like this was going to happen. And really, if you look at Harry's behavior, his public statements, his involvement in American life, right, has been almost zero, really, since Trump too. Do you know what I mean? There's been very little involvement in American life at all. He doesn't seem to have any American charities. He doesn't work with any American organizations. And everything that he says is about the United Kingdom. It's, I miss the bond, I miss the banter, I miss the bravery. I may currently live in the United States. I mean, that phrase now looks very telling, doesn't it, Dan? I may now currently live in
Yes,
the
that
United States.
change in language was so significant. And actually, Tom, it's like they have been building up to this for a very long time. And I guess we just thought, well, how are they going to do it? Is it really logistically possible? But the problem is, Tom, for them, all their projects collapsed in America. I mean, I think they're doing this because there is no alternative. But Tom, I do want to put another theory to you, and it is a bit more than a theory. Do you think there is an element of Harry needing to bring the children to the United Kingdom in case this marriage does end up collapsing? And what for a long time, Tom, was called a conspiracy theory was, I think, finally proven to be true, something I'd been reporting for a long time, that Meghan Markle had actually shopped the possibility of a post-divorce autobiography while she still was with Harry. Now, before it appeared in the pages of Vanity Fair, it was very easy to say, oh, you're talking rubbish. But, I had reported that she didn't want to do her autobiography until she had ended or until the marriage had collapsed, because there was a possibility the marriage would collapse. Now, Tom, if the marriage collapses in California, huge problem for Prince Harry to ever gain access or be able to bring his children back to the United Kingdom. Do you think it is partly to do with Harry wanting to provide some protection if things do not work out? Or do you think actually it's very much career and money focused and they are still united in this mission?
Well, it's a fascinating, fascinating topic. And the word that you hear from people around them is that they're still very into each other, that they're very touchy-feely, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when they're with each other. But as anybody knows, relationships are complicated beasts especially when you have children, and a whole number of things feed into that. And one of the principal factors in any often a principal factor in a difficulty relationship is money, right? I mean, it's a very well-known fact that, hey, when you're making $100 million a year, it's pretty easy to put up with, what was the Hunchback of Notre Dame called? You could put up with anyone as your spouse. But when the money starts to run out and the pressures start to build, things are more difficult. And don't forget that Harry himself said in court, they have made my wife's life a misery, my lord. So do you know what I mean? This is not. it's hard to believe that either of them are having the most brilliant time if they've reached a stage where their business has failed so badly that they've had to go back on everything that they said they were leaving the United Kingdom for. But if I may go back to the point you were making before, Dan, about how is this possible? How has
Yes.
Harry managed to pull this off? How he's managed to pull this off is because he's driven a wedge between his father and the heir. And there was always a wedge there, right? The roots of William and Charles's, William's enmity, William's dissatisfaction towards his father are not obscure, right? Everybody knows why, because of the way he treated his mother. My parents were divorced, and like most kids of divorced parents, I was brought up by my mum, and I felt pretty sour towards my father for many years because I was brought up with my mum, and I saw what my mum had gone through, and I adore my mother, and I if my father was the king and had remarried another woman and made her queen after my mother had died, I think I would have some feelings about that. So, but what Harry has very skillfully done is he's exploited Charles's love for him, and Charles does love Harry. He adores Harry, the darling boy. He's exploited it, and he's driven a wedge between the king and the heir. And by peeling off and separating William and the king, he's now got himself into a situation where he's basically able to come home with the king's blessing. And if notice you had Rob Jobson on earlier, who's been talking very eloquently about the Clive Alderton factor. I mean, clearly this has been known about for some time. The idea that the king just knew about this on Sunday is absolutely ridiculous. But the other point to say about this is that it's really hard to understand anything that's happened in the British royal family over the last couple of years if you just read the UK papers, because they can't really say anything that's too critical of the king. Now, some of them can. Now, interestingly, your old paper, The Sun, and
Yes.
Matt Wilkinson, is one of the few reporters who does have enough power to be able to criticize the king. Of course, he broke this remarkable story that the king had paid 1.5 million pounds worth of the settlement to Virginia Giuffre, that he had participated
Hmm.
in the cover up and the silencing of Virginia Giuffre. So, I mean, let nobody say that all members of the Royal Rota are corrupt, etc., etc. That said, it's look, as you know, if you work at those newspapers, if you want to continue getting notifications of where the king is going to be appearing and send your photographers to take a nice picture, you have to remain on the press officer's good side, and that means that you are not allowed to talk about the king's health. So, and it also means, ironically, that you're not allowed to talk about the argument between Charles and William, which is why I think part of the reason why my Substack has actually been quite successful is because I've been able to tell that story in a way that the legacy media haven't been able to tell
Well,
that story
absolutely. I
in
mean,
an intelligent and respectful way.
we actually
But
covered some of your comment on the Royalists, which is that the relations, and again, people don't like to hear this, but it is true that relations, and this was even before this announcement, Tom. So I imagine they're going to get worse. But you have reported that relations between King Charles and Prince William are the worst they have ever been.
yes, and that was according to a good old friend of both the King and the late Queen Elizabeth. But the other point that I want to make is that what this is about, Harry's return to the fold, the bigger picture of Harry's return to the fold, right? The coming back in July, you can have a flat at Buckingham Palace, you can blah, 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 blah. What this is also about, it's about Charles trying to take back control after that horribly botched announcement of his cancer. And when Charles announced the cancer, I actually was writing about this today because of Camilla talking about his cancer, but it was a disaster, right? Charles never meant to announce that he had cancer. He meant to announce that he was having treatment for a benign enlarged prostate, which is a very fashionable cause, thanks to brilliant work by organizations like Movember. it was a thing, and it was also a really convenient way for Charles to kind of telegraph, I'm not like my mother. The era of fussiness is over. I'm going to be open and transparent. But because they announced it before he went in for the procedure, when he then came out and people said, well, how did the procedure go? They didn't really have any choice but to announce that they had found cancer. And the point is, of course, they would have had to do it in the end. But the point is, they announced it 5 days after he had found out that he had cancer. So no one had had time to digest it. No one had had time to process it or think seriously about what it meant or anything like that. It was all completely rushed and hasty. And as a result of that, 2 days after that, William hired a new private secretary. All the power flowed to William. William was making all the big decisions. As you know, Dan, behind palace walls, there was a serious concern that the king could drop dead in 6 weeks.
Hmm.
And as a result of this, all the power flowed to William. Now, I'm told that the treatment has been very, very successful. King Charles has said the same thing in his announcement of Stand Up to Cancer at the end of last year. And part of what is going on with this bringing Harry back into the fold is King Charles reasserting his control over the family, saying, do you know what, pal? I'm going to be here for the next 10 years. I'm the boss, and this is the way we're doing it. You're just the Prince of Wales. Get back in your box.
Yeah, I know. I know. Oh, God, Tom. It's going to unravel. But of course, as well as following Outspoken, people must subscribe to The Royalist on YouTube and Substack. Thank God you're back from your holiday, at least. And Tom, does this mean you're going to have to, I mean, I know you said there's one chapter you're going to have to pull apart. Like, that must be a bit of a nightmare in terms of the Dukes.
You are not ready for what just happened. After 6 years of our lives are in danger, 6 years of I'll never come back, 6 years of tell-all interviews and Netflix specials torching this family to the ground, Harry and Meghan are coming home. And I need you to sit with that for a second, because something this big does not happen by accident. Somebody moved the pieces on this board a long time ago. Tonight I'm going to walk you through exactly how this unraveled, who's really pulling the strings, and why I think the palace's own story that the king only found out on Sunday is one of the biggest lies they've told us yet. Whose side are you on tonight? Because by the end of this, you might not even know anymore.
Actually, because it actually reinforces the central thesis of the point that I'm making in the book, which is that, there is a massive split at the heart of the crown. The king wants one thing and the heir wants another, and it's really, really damaging. And that the heir, William, feels very strongly that the example of Edward VIII should be implemented for Prince Harry and Prince Andrew, and that trying to rehabilitate these people doesn't work. And I must say, I kind of thought when it all happened in July and we saw Charles welcoming Harry back to Buckingham Palace, although in the end he didn't stay there, I sort of felt like it was a sort of bit of a gift, really, from the book writing gods, because it sort of stood up everything that I'd been saying in the book. And this really stands it up even more, which is that, Harry has Harry has undermined the British monarchy. And the extraordinary thing is, Dan, is that he seems to be doing it with the collusion of the monarch. I mean, it's really, really extraordinary. And everybody's grasping around to try and find reasons for this, right? But nobody can really give a proper reason. And the only reasons really that we've had are from the palace. Blood is blood. Well, that's not actually a reason. That's the kind of thing you say when you don't have a reason, right? Blood is thicker than water. It's just sort of stupid phrase that doesn't really mean very much. Or, as Robert Jobson has talked about, and I know you had Robert on earlier, and Robert's talked about this on my show, The Royalist, that the king is perhaps sicker than people like me who've been told that, I've been told that the king's doctors are running his treatment up and down the flagpole to other clients at the London clinic, which is this very fancy clinic in Harley Street where he's being treated. Robert's not so sure. Robert told me the other day that Charles has been having farewell audiences with people like Michael Fawcett. I mean, so I mean that's the other explanation, and I think that if Charles is perhaps sicker than I think, and I do happen to think that his recovery is going well, it would make a certain amount of sense. And I think the other argument is that Charles feels what I think is going on. I think that Charles feels he's been gifted back his life by God. And I know he's said that to people. He has said that to his friends, and he's a believer in divine right, Dan. Don't forget, like, this is a guy who's fully wrapped up in the kind of, mysticness and the Laurence van der Post and shamanism and all of this stuff. He genuinely believes that he has been appointed by God to be the king of the United Kingdom. And he genuinely believes now that he has been spared by God and sees it as his mission to, repair this hole at the heart of the royal family. I mean, but it's a bit of a game of speculation because ultimately it doesn't make any sense, right? It does not make any sense. These two are hugely, hugely unpopular characters. Look at their popularity ratings. The British public is not in a position to being ready to be won round on the issue of Meghan and Harry. I mean, it's not. It's going to be massively unpopular. It's going to be hugely destabilizing for the monarchy. It's going to present massive threat to William and Catherine, and it's also could present a problem to a future King George VII.
Oh my goodness, indeed. And that is why you need great independent reporters who operate outside of the royal rota to cover it all. So please do subscribe to Tom Sykes and his brilliant Royalist, The Royalist, on YouTube and Substack. Tom, I can't believe we're speaking after midnight, but of course, UK time at least. But of course, this was big news tonight. So I really, really, really do appreciate the time, Tom, and of course,
how many hours on YouTube is that for you today, Dan?
Oh my God, far too many.
5?
Far too many. I think it's like coming up to 5. Coming up to 5. Yeah. But fully worth it. I was so raging. I was actually so raging. I'm like, I've got to go and speak about this. But Tom Sykes, thank you so much.
It's really, really extraordinary.
It is, and I'm actually going to watch your show straight after this. Yeah.
6 years after they left the country, saying their lives were in danger.
And Meghan said she never wanted to come back. Do you remember that?
Never wanted to come back.
Told Omid Scobie at that last Buckingham Palace reception, I don't think I'll ever return. Now she did, but only really it was only for the funeral of and the Jubilee. The two sort of forced returns.
I'll tell you what's really interesting, Dan, as well. Yeah. Okay, so when I spoke to this source earlier in the year who was saying that Harry was going to look for a house here, and I was like, well, is Meghan, I was like, I can't see Meghan wanting to live in like the Cotswolds. I mean, I know there's a few fashionable Americans around, and it's not that far to Soho Farmhouse or Estelle Manor, but I mean, it's not exactly like a dream scenario, like for somebody who finds churches that smell a bit moldy or what have you. And they very much said to me, oh no, Meghan's going to stay in America. Meghan's going to stay in America, and Harry's just going to come back. And I was like, And then the next day, that story came out in the Wall Street Journal saying, if Harry ever wanted to remarry, he'd have to get the permission of the king and blah, blah, blah. And I remember messaging them the next day. And, we'd had a few drinks. And, well, I hadn't because I don't drink. But this person had a few. And I messaged them the next day and I was like, what do you think of this story in the Wall Street Journal? Like, is that what you were kind of, I was basically saying, is that what you were kind of implying when you were saying that Meghan wouldn't come back? They were like, no, not at all. They're still really get on. They really flirt together, blah, blah, blah. And I have heard that, like, Dan Wakeford, who,
former
turned
People
on
in
them,
Us
basically.
Weekly.
Yeah, he said they were like hot for each other still and this kind of stuff. So I don't know. Like, I mean, it seems like an incredibly weird
look,
decision.
Tom, there is going to be a lot to unravel. Well, exactly. Where is Doria? And there is going to be a lot to unravel. And I understand why a lot of people, Tom, are still not believing that Meghan will actually come. And that is the point, isn't it? Is this announcement to try and say, no, everything's fine. But actually, as you point out, maybe Meghan will. I mean, she does saying they're not going to sell the house. That seems crazy. I mean, that huge house that you can't afford and you're going to keep that. Why would you not downsize if you were just going to be there for, say, a couple of weeks a year to see Doria? So I think there's a lot to unravel here. Is this the beginning of some type of separation Could be. Could be. But we don't know yet. That is the key thing. We don't know yet because this announcement is woolly, and a lot of their announcements have been woolly, and then very quickly they fall apart when a little bit of pressure is put on them. So it's going to
And
be
will
fascinating.
this one fall apart?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing. In fairness to those people who are saying, well, just be careful taking anything that they say. I mean, I've been burnt by it, and I've apologized to my readers when I was burnt by it. And yeah, just be blooming careful, treating anything that they say as gospel. You do have to be careful. But I feel this one had just the other stuff that I've been covering over Charles's desire to see Harry, stuff I was told previously about them looking for a house, the fact that Harry's got nothing to do in America, the fact that he's so disengaged from American life, the sort of open emoting towards the UK and going on and on and on about how much he loves the UK. After all, it's just a huge misunderstanding. I do feel like there's certainly a kernel of truth there.
Here's how I knew something was off before I even finished reading the headline. This wasn't one paper getting a scoop. This was two major outlets' rivals, competitors dropping the exact same story at the exact same time. 10 p.m., like clockwork. That's not a leak. That's a coordinated release. That's a PR machine flipping a switch. And when I dug into it, the picture got clearer. Harry and Meghan's team had reportedly been briefing outlets all day under embargo, and everyone held the line until the agreed hour. So when people in my comments ask, how do we even know this is true? That's how. But I get the skepticism. We've been burned before. Remember the fake meeting with Buckingham Palace that fell apart the second anyone pushed on the timeline? Do you remember that one? Let me know if you were fooled too. And look, I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because the receipts are right there. This is a team that has told us things that simply were not true. Denials about briefing meetings that later turned out to be briefed by their own side. A flat denial about a certain reality TV family's involvement that later had to be walked back. Even the claim about getting married privately days before the royal wedding, directly contradicted by the Archbishop of Canterbury himself, who said that would have been a literal crime. So when this same team tells us everything's fine, we're just coming home for a bit, do you blame anyone for raising an eyebrow? Do you believe this announcement is the full story? Or are we being managed again? Tell me in the comments. Now let's talk about the part nobody's saying out loud, the money. Officially, they don't have UK security because they're not working royals and they don't live here. Simple as that, right? Except 6 years ago, it was acid attacks, knife attacks. Our lives are in danger. And now, suddenly, it's fine. I don't buy the fear disappearing. I buy the math. Government-funded protection versus a reported multi-million-dollar private security bill. That's not a small difference. That's a business decision. And here's the part that should make your ears prick up. Reporting already suggests the door's being left open for Harry to take on some role tied to his father, which, if it happens, puts them right back in the category of people who get protection paid for by us. Would you have made the same call if you were in their shoes? Or does this feel like they're having it both ways? Spare a thought for William tonight, because whatever happens next, he loses. If he shows up to family events, smiling next to the brother who wrote a memoir that humiliated him, he looks weak. If he stays away, he looks petty, and the tabloids will crucify him for it. There's no version of this where William comes out looking like the winner, and I think that's exactly the trap he's been put in. Reports going back years describe relations between William and his father as strained. Some say worse than they've ever been. And this homecoming isn't going to smooth that over. It's going to pour fuel on it. Do you think William was even consulted before this decision was made? Or was he the last to know, just like the rest of us claim to have been? Here's my theory, and I think it explains everything. After that cancer announcement, the one that was rushed out before anyone had time to process it, the one that briefly handed all the power in this family over to William, something in Charles changed. People close to him describe a man who believes he's been given his life back, spared for a reason, with a mission to heal this family before his reign ends. Add to that, a king known for a lifelong fascination with faith, mysticism, and destiny, and you start to see a monarch acting less like a strategist and more like a man trying to settle his soul before it's too late. Is this really reconciliation? Or is it a dying king's guilt talking? What do you think is really driving Charles right now? And now, for the theory that I think nobody wants to say out loud. What if this was never really about reconciliation at all? What if this is about protecting the children, just in case things don't work out between Harry and Meghan? We've already seen one conspiracy theory turn out to be true, reporting that Meghan explored a post-divorce memoir while still married to Harry, long before that ever became public. If that marriage were ever to end while they're based in California, Harry could face a real fight to bring his children back to Britain. Coming home now, while everything still looks intact, could be the safety net. Meanwhile, the house in America isn't being sold. Meghan reportedly isn't planning to relocate permanently. So is this a family reunion? Or is this one man quietly making sure he has a way home if his marriage collapses? Would you have made the same move if you were him? And here's the part that tells you everything about how the country actually feels. When we asked you tonight, do you want Harry and Meghan back in the UK? 87% of you said no. Only 13% said yes. Read that again. This is not a nation ready to welcome them back with open arms, no matter what the palace PR machine wants us to believe. So who exactly is this homecoming for? Is it for the public? Or is it for a king trying to make peace with his own mortality, whatever the cost to the monarchy's popularity? Which side of that 87% are you on and why? So here's where we're left. A king who may believe he's been given a second chance by God. A brother caught in a no-win situation. A couple whose promises have a habit of falling apart the moment anyone applies real pressure. And a public that, by an overwhelming margin, simply isn't buying the fairy tale version of this story. Is this the beginning of genuine healing, or the beginning of the end, dressed up as a family reunion? I don't think we'll have long to wait to find out. 10 days, they say. But I've learned the hard way with this family nothing is ever as simple as the headline makes it sound. So tell me, do you believe this is real reconciliation, or a calculated move dressed up as one? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me whose side you're on, and I'll see you in the next one.